Anthropomorphism is a very long, unwieldy word, but basically what it means is describing animals um, or things as if they were humans. And that's one of the big pitfalls of the way we perceive companion animals and animals like horses, because the more we love them, the more we're inclined to see them as humans. And it's not altogether a bad thing. It can help us create empathy with them, but it also can be a trap. But this diagram on the left is really a diagram. Actually, it came from Mary Longden originally, but the diagram itself, the idea is an old academic one, but Mary Longden first introduced me to this, that, when we first begin our journey with any new skill or knowledge, we are unconsciously incompetent. We don't know what we don't know. And then soon we begin to know what we don't know. We're still not that good at it, but at least we know what we don't know. And then we become aware of what we have to do, and we're quite good at it, so we become consciously competent. And that's in the part of the brain called, or the part of learning, but it is a part of the brain too, called declarative memory. We actually know what we have to do, and we're conscious of doing it. But when our skill levels get higher, and that would be true for so many people in this room, we become unconsciously competent. In other words, we can just do it. And often we fail to understand how why others can't. And it also sometimes puts a bit of a roadblock for teaching. So what I'm trying to do in this, and this is the job that Portland Jones and I have embarked upon, is to try and make it very easy for kids to learn what we know when we're unconsciously competent. Equitation science itself, it isn't a method, and I want to stress that. It's actually your method. It just really is a way of getting us to do better by improving mostly our timing, as I said. So that's where we are. So much of the syllabus is devoted to about the horse, so that children get to learn as much as they can about the horse. It's an animal that's been around for a long time, 55 odd million years, and we've domesticated it for only around about 6,000 from studies in archaeology. We know that. And that's a very short amount of time. We haven't really changed the horse a lot, except we've changed its form by selective breeding. And we've probably also changed its behaviour a little bit in that we've made it much more tolerant. We call that habituation. It's much more easy to habituate to things. Some of them, of course, aren't. Like some of them are very flighty. And that's because we've reintroduced flighty genes. Mostly they came in through racing. Before racing came into the world in Britain, horses were generally much more utilitarian and easy to use. The family to church and all that, kids later on to school, and used in the farm. So the horse is really a horse, and he's very clever, very good at forming habits, very good at what we call operant conditioning and classical conditioning. I'll go through that in a minute. They're really easy learning processes to know, and you don't even have to know them in those words. It's only at A and B level we introduce them. But the horses are also not good at complex thought. That part of the brain that we have for higher mental processes just doesn't exist in the horse. And that's actually an advantage for him, because he doesn't sort of muck around inside his head wondering what he's going to have for dinner, or, when this great event's going to happen. He really is just living in the moment. And so it's important that we recognise that basically he is adapted to be a grazing animal on the open grassland, and that's a very dangerous place to be. Animals that have survived like that, for example, antelopes, zebras, quite a few. But when you're a grazing animal in the open grassland, not closed woodland, you're always visible to your predators, and that's quite different. And that's why the horse has got, amongst all vertebrates, the largest eyes, or amongst the largest eyes of all vertebrates, and exceptionally good hearing. I'll go through that a bit in a minute. So looking at his vision, first of all, horses have very panoramic vision. They can see up to almost 360, so almost full circle. And there's mostly a narrow range of binocular vision at the front, and their eyes on the side give them vision of either side. What is really interesting about horses and other grazers is that the right eye loads the left hemisphere of the brain, the left visual hemisphere, and the left eye loads the right. And so too do the left and right nostrils. And what it does, it gives the horse basically two hard drives. And that's why it's important that we introduce things to horses on both sides. Now, you already knew that, but you see, it helps to explain it in some way that the horse really, it's not just that he likes to, he actually needs to. And if his left eye hasn't seen what his right eye has, he might get a shock. And I remember that very well back in my eventing days at Wandon, which was the only one-day event where we had flowers around the arena. If you didn't go around on both reins and show him the flowers, if his first turn was left and his right eye never saw flowers before, quite often the horse would be going, "Wah," and you'd think, well, that's a bit stupid, you've already seen the flowers. But he says, no, I haven't. That right eye never saw them, because we went around on the other rein. Horses also have a visual strip. So instead of a retina full of visual cells like we do, they have a visual strip which is along the horizon. And so they see the horizon really well, which makes good sense for a prey animal. But they don't see above and below well. So they've got to really change their head height to see those things. Those peripheral aspects are really not good in the horse. But the other thing is, instead of having a central fovea like you and I do, where if we look at something, we're definitely focusing on it, the horse sees all of this equally. So his focus is actually quite equal everywhere. When he looks in a certain direction, it's mostly to give his eyes the full picture of what he wants to look at, as well as his ears to help. The horse has largely black and white vision, but I shouldn't say that really because it's colour vision, but it's colour like in twilight, because cones give us colour vision and rods give us black and white vision. And rods and black and white vision are very, very advantageous at night time. If your eyes full of cone cells, like in birds, you have to roost far away from your predators. It gives you fantastic vision, cone cells, but it means you're actually you have to hide. So most animals have black and white vision to a large extent, like more like twilight or dusk vision, and that's very important for the horse, so he can see at night. And I know as a kid, when I lived on King Island, we used to gallop our ponies to the beach and chase kangaroos, and then we'd come home at night, and we had two fences to jump on the way home, and we didn't even know exactly where the fences were when it was pitch black dark, but we relied on those ponies to just leap over and then turn hard left when landing, and they were good at it, luckily, or I wouldn't be here, I don't suppose. Now, he also has a very acute sense of smell. That Flehmen response in that picture where he raises his lip, what he does is he compresses air in his nostrils, and that increased air pressure causes the air to vaporize, condense in those nostrils and form droplets on this organ called Jacobson's organ, which basically gives him a really accurate readout. Very important for animals that need their sense of smell for food, but also for mating. You know, stallions need to know exactly when the mare's precisely in estrus, because otherwise he'll pay severely if he gets it wrong. I mentioned the prefrontal cortex is the area where we elaborate all of our thoughts and imaginings in, but the horse doesn't have that. So he can't think ahead and think back and roll the film forward and back like we can. But he has an excellent memory. That is a recognition memory, like a trigger-based memory. But he doesn't have a recall memory like we do, where we can think of the whole event. It's a real advantage to the horse, because it means that if he's been hurt with the whip or something like that, when he sees the whip next time, if it was a really severely bad experience, even weeks, months later, the visual picture of the whip will trigger a flight response. His sense of hearing is quite fantastic as well. What is unusual for a large animal is that he doesn't have hearing at the lower frequencies like most large animals, like elephants and whales do. He has hearing better in the higher frequency region. So our hearing ranges from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, but a horse's hearing ranges from 50 hertz to 33.5 kilohertz. So in other words, he hears at much higher frequencies. So there are things he's going to be able to hear that we probably can't. Also, I wanted to include this slide because many horsemen have talked about in the past the importance of the horses, getting control of the horse's legs. And that is really vital, that we do get control of the horse's legs. It's more important than even getting control of his head carriage. Of course, that makes it better because if we get control of his head carriage, we can make his back softer and we can put him into more of a posture of calmness. So that's very true. But nonetheless, getting absolute control of his legs in stop and go and turn and sideways of the hind legs is a really valuable thing. And there's a part of the brain which you can't see there because the slide's too small, called the substantia nigra, which is part of a big organ called the basal ganglia, which is all about control of movement. It's the largest user of dopamine in the brain, is the control of locomotion. And that's why it's really valuable to him in terms of learning, that if he gets to show escape behaviours and run away from things he's scared of, or on the other hand, if we get control of those legs, it has a really high coefficient of learning compared to other things. So we need to be aware of that the horse, the more we can control his limbs, the better he will be in hand and under saddle. And I use that picture at the bottom there because, you know, there's so many extremes of what the legs can do. That's a horse in reining doing a very strong crossover of the front legs. So there are all sorts of ways we can train the horse through reinforcement to use his legs. And that's really what dressage and jumping and reining and working equitation and polo is all about.